I remember the day my son disappeared like it was burned into the back of my eyelids. It was a Thursday. Quiet, cloudy, unremarkable. The kind of day that usually slips away unnoticed. But that was the day everything in my life began to unravel. Jake wasn't the type to vanish. He was 28, responsible, worked as a mechanic, and though we didn't talk every single day, he always answered my calls. Always. That's what made it strange when he didn't pick up that morning. I figured he was busy, maybe under a car, covered in oil and grime, forgetting his phone somewhere. But when the hours stretched into the night and his friends said they hadn't seen him since Monday, a tightness began to form in my chest. By Saturday, I couldn't eat. By Sunday, I couldn't sleep. The police took my report, but I could tell by the way the officer's pen slowed mid-sentence that they didn't see it as urgent. "Adults go missing all the time," he said. "He's probably just taking time for himself." But Jake wasn't that kind of person. He loved his routines. Same coffee, same drive to work, same Friday dinners with me. If he needed space, he would have said so. I started checking his social media, nothing for days. His phone went straight to voicemail. His neighbors hadn't seen him. Even his dog Max was missing from the yard. I started to feel like I was slipping into a fog where everything was real and unreal at once. Like maybe I'd dreamed him up, and I was waking to find that dream gone. Then, 2 weeks later, I got a call. It wasn't from Jake. It was from his landlord. He said, "Ma'am, your son's rent is overdue and there's a smell coming from his house." That's when I felt my stomach drop. Not the kind of fear that makes you jump, but the kind that crawls up your spine and whispers, "You're about to see something you can't unsee." When I pulled up to his house that afternoon, the sky had that bruised look, yellow-gray clouds smudging out the sun. The air was thick and still. The front door was locked, but I still had a spare key. My hands shook as I pushed it in and turned the knob. The moment the door creaked open, I knew something was wrong. The house was dark, curtains drawn, the air stale like it hadn't been breathed in days. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not quite death, but something sour and wet, like spoiled meat mixed with mold. "Jake," I called out, my voice cracking. Nothing. My footsteps echoed softly against the hardwood floor. His jacket was still hanging by the door. His shoes, the same ones he wore to work every day, were lined up neatly by the mat. I stepped into the living room. The TV remote was on the arm of the couch, a half-empty mug of coffee sitting beside it, coated with a thin film of dust. Everything looked frozen, like he had simply vanished mid-breath. Then I made my way toward his bedroom at the end of the hall. Each step seemed heavier than the last. The smell was stronger there, faintly metallic now, tinged with something I couldn't place. When I pushed the door open, the room was dim. The blinds were half closed, letting in thin strips of light that sliced across the floor. Jake's bed was neatly made. Too neatly. He never made it that perfectly. And that's when I saw it. A faint movement. Something shifting in the darkness beneath the bed. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe shadows moving as the curtains swayed. But the air was still, and the movement didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, like someone breathing under there. I froze. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. "Jake?" I whispered. Nothing. I crouched down, my knees trembling, and peered into the narrow space beneath the frame. The smell was strongest there. I couldn't see much, just darkness and the faint outline of boxes, maybe a pair of shoes. Then something glinted. 2 eyes, wide, unblinking, staring right back at me. I gasped and stumbled back, slamming into the nightstand. The lamp crashed to the floor and shattered. For a few seconds, the silence was deafening. Then I heard it, a slow, dragging sound, something crawling, scraping against the wood, and then it stopped. My whole body went cold. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My mind was screaming to move, to get out, but my legs felt like stone. When I finally found the strength to stand, I backed out of the room slowly, eyes never leaving that dark space under the bed. I reached for my phone to call the police, but it was dead. I hadn't charged it since the drive. And that's when I heard it. A whisper. So soft, so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. It came from under the bed, and it said my name. The whisper still echoes in my head, my name, spoken from beneath that bed in a voice I could barely recognize. I wanted to tell myself it was my imagination, the house settling, a trick of exhaustion, but something about the way the air shifted after that whisper, it felt intentional, like the room was listening. I backed out of the doorway, my eyes never leaving the space where I'd seen those eyes glinting back at me. The air had grown colder, thicker, pressing against my chest like a weight. I stumbled into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the handle. The moment the latch clicked, I felt a strange rush of relief, as if whatever was under there couldn't follow me now that the door was shut. I went back to the living room and tried to steady my breathing. The house was dead silent again, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I plugged my phone into a charger by the wall. The screen flickered to life, the low battery icon glowing red. I stared at it, waiting for it to power up. Then, I saw it. A shadow pass by the hallway. I froze. It was too quick to make out clearly, but I knew I'd seen something, a figure, moving from Jake's room toward the bathroom. I swallowed hard. Jake? No answer. The house was silent again. The phone finally powered on, and I grabbed it with both hands. But before I could dial 911, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was a soft tapping from down the hallway. 3 slow taps, a pause, then 2 more. It was coming from Jake's room. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but I didn't. Something in me, something deeper than fear, refused to leave. This was my son's house. Whatever was in there, I had to know. I grabbed a small flashlight from the kitchen drawer, one of those thin metal ones Jake always kept for power outages. The beam flickered weakly at first, then steadied. I crept back toward the bedroom. Each step felt heavier than the last. The smell was stronger now, crawling down the hallway like invisible smoke. I stopped at the door. My hand hovered over the knob. The tapping had stopped. I pushed the door open again. The room looked exactly the same, the bed perfectly made, the curtains unmoving, but the feeling in the air had changed. It was colder, denser. I took a step inside, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam swept across the bed, the dresser, the mirror, until it caught on something I hadn't noticed before. A dark stain on the floor, just near the edge of the bed frame. I crouched down slowly. The stain was almost black, and when I touched it, it was sticky. My stomach turned. Blood. Fresh. And it wasn't Jake's. I knew that somehow. I could feel it. That this wasn't just blood. It was wrong. I aimed the flashlight under the bed again. Empty. No eyes, no movement. Just darkness and the faint glint of something metallic. I reached under, fingers trembling, and pulled it out. It was a phone. Jake's phone. The screen was cracked, and when I pressed the power button, it buzzed weakly, then lit up. A single notification flashing across the lock screen. 1 new voicemail received 3 days ago. My throat tightened. I tapped play.
The message began with static, faint rustling, the sound of someone breathing heavily, then Jake's voice, hoarse and broken. "Mom, if you get this, don't come here. Please, just—" A sharp sound interrupted him, something crashing, followed by a muffled scream, then silence. The message ended. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now, my vision blurred. That was 3 days ago, meaning whatever happened to him wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was still happening. I grabbed the phone and stood up, ready to run, to get out of this cursed house, when I saw something in the mirror across the room. A reflection. Behind me. Something crouched beside the bed. I spun around. Nothing. The bed was untouched, but the sheets were no longer smooth. They were bunched up, like someone had just crawled out from underneath them. That's when I saw it again. The movement. A slow rise and fall of the mattress, like breathing. And then a voice, low, guttural, and wrong, came from behind me. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned, flashlight shaking wildly, the beam slicing through empty air. No one was there, but the whisper had come from the closet. The door was cracked open, a thin strip of darkness spilled into the room, and from inside, something shifted. It sounded like fabric tearing, or skin. I took one step toward the door and stopped, because now I could smell it clearly. That same foul, metallic rot, but mixed with something else. Perfume. A woman's perfume. Not mine. Not Jake's. Someone else's. I felt my knees weaken. There had been someone else in this house. Recently. And suddenly, I understood what kind of secret my son might have been keeping. The kind that could get someone killed. As I stood there frozen, the closet door creaked open wider. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, I heard the faint sound of breathing. Not mine, not human. Deep, guttural, and too close. Right next to my ear.
For a few seconds, I couldn't tell whether I was awake or trapped inside a nightmare. The dark was complete, thick, suffocating, alive. The breathing beside my ear scraped in and out, like air forced through a broken pipe. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Then the flashlight sputtered back to life. A thin, shaking beam cut through the black, swinging wildly as my hand trembled. The closet door was wide open now. Nothing inside but hanging clothes, Jake's shirts, a pair of old work boots, the faint scent of that unfamiliar perfume. But the breathing hadn't stopped. It was behind me again. I spun, shining the light across the room, and the beam landed on the bed. The blanket was moving, not the slow, rhythmic lift of someone sleeping. It was pulsing, twitching, like something crawling underneath the sheets. I stepped forward, pulse hammering. "Jake," I whispered, even though I knew whatever was there wasn't him. The movement froze. The room went silent again. And then, from under the covers, a hand reached out. Not quite human, skin waxy and gray, nails cracked and too long. It grasped the edge of the bed frame like a spider testing its web. I staggered backward, the flashlight clattering from my hand. Its beam rolled across the floor, throwing jagged shadows up the wall. The hand slid back beneath the sheets. That's when I heard a sound I'll never forget. A soft, broken sob. It sounded exactly like my son. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, to run, but the mother in me refused. "Jake," I whispered. The sobbing grew louder. I took a step forward, then another. When I was close enough, I grabbed the blanket and yanked it away. Nothing. The bed was empty. But under the mattress, there was a hollow thud, like something shifting inside the frame itself. Heart racing, I crouched and lifted the edge of the mattress. That's when I saw it. A compartment, carved crudely into the base of the bed. Inside was a stack of papers, a small camera, and, God help me, a strip of photographs taped together. I pulled them out with trembling hands. The pictures showed Jake tied to a chair in this very room, blood streaked across his face. Behind him, a shadow. Tall, broad, human, and next to the shadow, a woman. The same perfume. Her face was turned away, but I could see the edge of a tattoo curling down her neck. A black rose. I recognized it. I'd seen that tattoo before. Years ago. On a woman named Clara Morrison, Jake's ex-girlfriend. She'd left him 3 years back after a breakup that had nearly destroyed him. I remembered her as sweet but unstable, jealous, unpredictable. Jake never told me what ended it, only that she'd said, "You'll regret leaving me." I thought it was just heartbreak talking. But now, the camera in the compartment was cracked, but when I pressed the power button, it flickered on. A single video file appeared on the screen, dated 4 days ago. I tapped play. The image jolted into focus. Jake, sitting on the bed, arms bound with duct tape. He was shaking. His lips were split. Behind him stood Clara. Her voice was calm, almost tender. "You shouldn't have lied to me, Jake. You shouldn't have made me feel like I was nothing." She bent down, stroking his face with the back of her hand. "You said your mother would always save you. Let's see if that's true." The video cut off. I dropped the camera. A roar of blood filled my ears. Rage and grief twisted together until I couldn't breathe. She had him. She hurt him. And she wanted me to find this. The whisper, the eyes, the voice calling my name, it wasn't random. It was part of her game. I stood there shaking, staring at the bed, at the dark compartment that had hidden my son's suffering. Then the flashlight beam shifted on its own. It slid slowly across the floor until it pointed at the closet again. Inside, something glimmered. I stepped closer, dread curling through me. Hanging from the rail was a necklace, a small silver pendant in the shape of a heart. I knew it instantly. It was mine. A gift Jake had given me for my birthday last year. And now it hung in his closet, smeared with dried blood. Beneath it, etched into the closet wall, were 3 words carved in rough letters. "She's not done." I stumbled back, clutching the necklace. The flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor again, stopping under the bed. Its beam caught something else, something wedged against the far wall. Another photograph. This one of me, taken through the living room window of my own house. I left the flashlight where it was and bolted from the room. My phone nearly slipped from my grip as I dialed 911. "Please," I said, voice shaking. "My son, he's been kidnapped, maybe worse. There's evidence, please send someone." The operator kept her voice calm, asking for the address. I gave it to her, but even as I spoke, I could tell something was wrong. A faint click echoed on the line, followed by static. Then, a woman's voice, soft, familiar, came through. "I told you not to come back." The line went dead. I dropped the phone. Through the front window, I saw headlights sweep across the driveway. For one breathless moment, I thought it was the police. Then the car door opened, and Clara stepped out. She was smiling. Clara stood in the driveway, smiling like nothing was wrong. The sun had dipped behind the clouds, leaving the house bathed in a gray, suffocating twilight. Her hair was long, black, tangled like the roots of some dark tree, and the black rose tattoo on her neck seemed to pulse in the dim light. "Clara," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Where is my son?" Her smile widened. Slowly, deliberately, she took a step forward. "Don't be so dramatic," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried an edge sharp enough to cut metal. "He's fine. For now." I wanted to rush her, to grab her, to shake the truth out of her. But the moment I stepped forward, the air around me seemed to thicken. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and I stumbled back. Something about her presence felt wrong, like She carried a darkness inside her, alive and watching. "You shouldn't have come here," she continued. "You were supposed to stay away. You're meddling where you don't belong." "Why?" I shouted. "Why are you doing this to him? To me?" She tilted her head, studying me. "You think this is about your precious Jake?" Her lips curled into a sneer. "No, it's about you. You raised him to be weak. You let him lie, let him hide. And now you'll see what happens when the truth comes out." Her words didn't make sense, but deep down I felt it, the weight of a secret Jake had been carrying, a secret that had led him straight into her hands. I tried to calm myself, to think clearly. My eyes scanned the driveway, the yard, anything that could give me leverage. And then I saw it, a hatch in the back porch, partially hidden under a faded doormat. She noticed my gaze. Her smile faded. "Curious, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I moved toward it anyway, heart hammering. She stepped in front of me, blocking the path. "You can't save him," she whispered, "but you can watch." With a swift motion, she yanked open the hatch. Beneath it was a set of narrow stairs, leading down into darkness. A cold, damp smell rose up, a mix of earth, mold, and something dead. I froze. The sound of dripping water echoed from below. Something scuttled in the shadows. "You want to know where he is?" she said. "Fine. Look." I didn't hesitate. I climbed down the stairs, each step slick with moisture. At the bottom, a dim light flickered, an old bulb swinging on a frayed cord. And there he was, Jake. His shirt was torn, his face bruised, blood streaked down his cheek. His hands were bound above his head, chains rattling with every movement. The room was small, windowless, and smelled of rot and metal. Clara stepped down behind me. "You see," she said almost cheerfully, "he's fine. Until he isn't." I fell to my knees beside him. "Jake, I'm here. I'll get you out." He looked up at me, eyes wide, terrified. But then I noticed something I hadn't expected. The fear wasn't just in him, it was in her, in the way she was watching me. And then it clicked. Clara hadn't just taken Jake to hurt him. She had taken him to punish me. "You thought you could protect him," she said. "You thought you could stop me. But you raised him to be weak. You never saw it, did you? That boy couldn't fight, couldn't survive. And now, you're going to watch it." I wanted to scream, to throw her across the room, to rip her apart with my bare hands. But then, a cold thought slithered into my mind. If she thinks she can control this, she doesn't know me. I stood slowly, my eyes locking on Clara's. The air between us seemed to thrum with tension, a storm waiting to break. "You've underestimated me," I said softly. "You think this is just about hurting my son, but you're wrong. It's about justice. And justice is coming for you." Her smile faltered. You're nothing. You're weak. You'll never." Then I lunged. It wasn't a fight like in the movies. No punches, no running around. It was calculated. Every step, every move was meant to disarm her, to get close without giving her the chance to strike. She lunged at me with a knife. I barely dodged, the blade slicing the air where my chest had been moments before. The smell of metal made me gag, but I kept moving. I grabbed the chains that held Jake, yanking them with all my strength. He fell into my arms, coughing, shaking. "Are you okay?" I whispered. He nodded weakly. "Mom, she's something else." I didn't answer. Clara recovered faster than I expected. She was like a predator, every movement precise, every strike calculated. But I had something she didn't anticipate. Anger. Pure, unrelenting fury. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the corner. When she lunged again, I swung it. It hit her arm, making her drop the knife. I didn't hesitate. I pushed her against the wall, pinning her with all my weight. Justice isn't mercy, and you're about to pay for everything you've done. Her eyes widened, shock flickering across her face. And for the first time, I saw fear. Under that fear, I realized something. Revenge wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about me. And I wasn't finished. Clara's eyes were wide now, fear and disbelief battling for control. She wasn't used to being confronted, especially not by someone she thought powerless. I held Jake tight, feeling the weight of everything we'd been through. The bruises on his face burned like fire in my chest. Every scream, every threat, every day he had suffered down here, it had all led to this moment. "You're done," I said, voice low, steady. "No more hiding, no more games." Clara laughed, a brittle, twisted sound. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "I made this house a trap. Every corner, every shadow, you can't stop what's coming." I glanced around. The basement was small, but the shadows seemed alive, curling and twisting along the walls. The damp air carried a foul stench, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed like a heartbeat. "You underestimated me," I said, stepping closer. "And you underestimated him." Jake trembled beside me, but he nodded. Something had shifted in his eyes, not just fear, but determination. The terror that had once paralyzed him was giving way to something else, something dangerous. Clara's lips curled back, revealing teeth clenched tight. She lunged forward, grabbing a metal pipe from a corner. The sound of it scraping the floor made my stomach lurch. I swung the broken piece of wood I'd grabbed before. It connected with a sharp thwack against her shoulder. She screamed, stumbling back. But she recovered instantly, eyes blazing with rage. She wasn't human, not entirely. Every move was calculated, deliberate, almost inhuman. And then I saw it. Beneath the tattoo, beneath the pale skin, her veins were dark, pulsing unnaturally, like they carried poison. I swallowed. This wasn't just revenge. This was something otherworldly. "You've taken him from me," she screamed. "I gave him life. He belonged to me." "No," I said, moving closer, forcing her back toward the corner. "He belonged to himself, and you'll pay for every scar, every tear, every scream." She swung the pipe, narrowly missing my head. I ducked, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back. Her scream echoed through the basement, hollow and wild. Jake watched, eyes wide, and then he did something I didn't expect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, jagged shard of glass, something he'd hidden all these days. "I'm not afraid anymore," he whispered. Clara froze, eyes flicking to him. In that split second, I realized this was the revenge she'd never counted on. We were fighting back together. Jake lunged, slashing at her arm with the shard. She screamed, more in surprise than pain, and I took advantage, forcing her down onto the damp floor. The pipe clattered beside her. "You thought you could break him," I said, gripping her hair, forcing her to look at me. "You thought you could break me, but we're stronger than your hatred." Her eyes flickered with panic for the first time, and I saw the truth beneath the madness. She was fragile. Dangerous, yes, but fragile. I pressed forward. "Justice isn't mercy. It's survival. And you're not surviving this." For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then she roared, grabbing a jagged piece of concrete from the floor. I blocked it with my arm, pain shooting up my side, and slammed her back into the wall. Jake screamed, lunging to help me, but I stopped him. "Stay back, let me finish this." Clara struggled, her strength wild and uncontrolled, but every strike she made, every desperate movement, only fueled my resolve. I pressed down harder, my anger turning into pure, unrelenting focus. Finally, she froze, exhausted, terrified, defeated. Her chest heaved, her eyes darting wildly. The shadow of madness that had controlled her flickered and died. "You can't stop me," she whispered, voice breaking. "This isn't over." I stood, chest heaving, looking down at her. "It is over," I said. "For now." Jake collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held him tightly, letting the relief wash over me, but I didn't relax completely. Clara's words lingered, an ominous promise. Even defeated, she was dangerous. Even defeated, she could strike again. But for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since Jake disappeared. Hope. We climbed out of the basement together, the air outside sharp and cold against our skin. I glanced back at the house, shadowed and silent now. The revenge had been mine. Hard-earned, terrifying, necessary. But the horror wasn't gone. It was just waiting. And I knew, deep down, that one day it would come back.
The night air bit at our skin as Jake and I stepped onto the driveway. The house loomed behind us, silent and dark, but it felt alive, like it was watching. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, holding secrets it would never give up. Jake clung to me, shivering, exhausted. I held him close, trying to shield him from the memory of the basement, from the screams, the chains, the terror. But I knew I couldn't shield him from the truth. "Mom, she'll come back, right?" he whispered. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The question wasn't one a mother wanted to hear, but it was honest. She had survived our fight. She had vanished into the shadows of her own madness. "I don't know, Jake," I said quietly, "but we're going to stay together, and I'll protect you, no matter what." We didn't notice at first that the car headlights of the responding officers were cutting across the yard. Their radios crackled, voices low and urgent. I waved them over, my hands trembling, still gripping Jake's arm. Inside, officers moved cautiously, flashlights sweeping the lawn and driveway. One of them asked if anyone was still inside. I told them no, that we had freed Jake, that the woman had fled. They nodded, taking notes, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. "You saw her?" one officer asked. I nodded. "Clara Morrison, she's dangerous." "Did she hurt him?" the officer asked, glancing at Jake. Jake shook his head weakly, but I could see the tremor in his hands, the lingering fear in his eyes. She tried," he whispered. The officers led us to a squad car, wrapping blankets around us. I didn't move until Jake was safe inside. Only then did I glance back at the house. It felt alive. Not like a building, something older, something patient, something that had been waiting for revenge long before we ever walked through the door. Over the next few days, the world tried to assume its normal rhythm, but for Jake and me, nothing was normal anymore. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of the room made our hearts hammer. And at night, when the world was quiet, I could almost hear her voice, soft, taunting, promising she wasn't done. I kept him close. I checked locks, alarms, every window, but deep down, I knew. Protection could only go so far. Even with her gone, Clara had left a mark, not just on Jake's body, but on his mind and mine. One night, a week after the escape, I found him staring at the bedroom wall, wide-eyed and silent. "What is it?" I whispered. He pointed at the shadow the moon cast through the curtains. "Mom, she's here." I froze. The fear in his voice was real. My first thought was that he was imagining it, that it was just the trauma talking. But the air was different, heavier, colder. Then I heard it. A whisper, soft, deliberate. You can't hide from me. I spun, but the room was empty. The windows were locked, the door was shut. Jake buried his face into my chest, shaking. I held him tightly, my own fear clawing at my chest. The realization hit me then. Clara's game wasn't over. It couldn't be. She had planted her madness into our lives, and now it lingered like a shadow, watching, waiting, patient. I tried to go on as normal. I went to work, I cooked meals, I tried to laugh with Jake, but every small sound, every creak, every knock, every whisper of wind made my stomach tighten. One afternoon, I went back to the house. The police had investigated, but found nothing. No sign of Clara, no sign of the basement horrors, aside from a few broken boards and scratches along the walls. I stood in the empty living room, trying to convince myself it was over, but as I walked toward the bedroom, my foot hit something cold and metallic on the floor. A small pendant, silver, shaped like a heart. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was mine, the one Jake had given me. Smudged with dirt, with a faint trace of something I didn't want to think about. I dropped it. And that's when I saw it. A shadow in the corner of the room. Not the usual one, the one cast by the window, but different. It moved. Slowly, deliberately, curling around the wall like smoke. I stepped back, heart racing. The shadow lingered, and then I heard the whisper again, clearer this time. You thought it was over. I ran out of the house, dragging Jake behind me. We didn't stop until we were blocks away, shaking and gasping for air. Later, in the safety of our neighbor's house, I held Jake close. His face was pale, his eyes wide, reflecting my own terror. "Mom, she's still there," he whispered. I hugged him tighter, trying to hold back my own panic. "I know, Jake, I know." And in that moment, I understood the truth. Revenge doesn't end horror. It doesn't erase trauma. It only delays it, gives it a pause before it returns, sharper, louder, hungrier. And Clara, she was patient. Even now, weeks later, I hear whispers at night, footsteps in empty halls, shadows that move when nothing else does. I sleep with one eye open, holding Jake close. Because the horror isn't over. And I know, deep down, it never will be.
The nights grew longer, darker, colder. Even the sun seemed reluctant to rise, as if the world itself sensed what had happened and didn't want to witness it again. Jake slept fitfully, murmuring her name in his dreams, Clara. Every time he did, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. One night, I woke to a whisper, "You can't hide from me." The voice was unmistakable, Clara. I froze, listening. It came from the hallway outside our bedroom. I held my breath, gripping the baseball bat I had hidden under the bed. The air was thick, heavy, almost alive. And then I saw it. A shadow, taller than any human should be, moving along the wall. It stretched and twisted unnaturally, slinking closer to the bedroom door. The outline was familiar, Clara, but distorted, as if she were half-formed, half-shadow, a creature of darkness and rage. I shook Jake awake. "Wake up, now." He gasped, eyes wide with terror. "Mom, she's here." "Yes," I whispered. "She's here. Stay close." The shadow moved closer, and I realized with a sickening certainty that this wasn't Clara's body. She had changed. Whatever darkness she had carried inside her had taken form, twisted into something more than human. I raised the bat. "You want us? Come get us." The shadow paused, then seemed to ripple, like smoke on water. It spoke again, voice echoing unnaturally in the room. "You think the game is over? You only delayed it." Jake clutched my hand, and I felt his fear, his pulse, his terror, and it fueled me. "We survived once," I said, voice steady. "We'll survive again." The shadow lunged. It moved impossibly fast, slamming into the doorframe, making it shudder. I swung the bat with all my strength, connecting with a sickening thud. The shadow recoiled, but didn't vanish. Instead, it twisted, reforming, its distorted form shrinking and stretching at the same time, like it was testing me. "You're stronger than I thought, but you cannot stop me forever." I realized then that Clara had become something else, something that didn't just want revenge. She thrived on fear, on terror, on the knowledge that we could never truly escape her. Jake tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, I think she's inside my head." I felt it too, a creeping presence, whispering, tugging at our minds. Memories of the basement, the chains, the screams, the terror she had inflicted, they weren't just memories anymore. They were alive, pulsating, feeding her. "We have to fight her here, together. Whatever this is, she's not human, but neither are we." I grabbed Jake, pulling him close. I whispered into his ear, "Focus. Remember who we are. Fear only gives her power. Fight it. Fight her." The shadow shrieked, a sound that rattled the walls, made the floor tremble, and sent a wave of nausea through me. Clara's distorted form surged forward, eyes glowing like black coals, teeth elongated into fangs that gleamed even in the darkness. I swung the bat again, hitting her chest. This time, something incredible happened. The shadow faltered. I realized that her form, however terrifying, wasn't indestructible. "Jake!" I shouted. "Now!" He picked up the shard of glass he had hidden for weeks, the same one he had used in the basement. Together, we charged, swinging, striking, screaming. The shadow shrieked, twisting, thrashing, its form splintering into fragments of darkness that hissed and writhed across the floor. I could see Clara's face for a brief moment, half human, half nightmare, screaming in fury and disbelief. Then she collapsed, not entirely gone, but retreating, a swirl of shadow that seeped into the walls, the corners, the cracks of the house. She wasn't defeated, not really. But we had won this battle. Jake collapsed into my arms, shaking. "Mom, she's gone?" I held him tightly. "For now, but we have to be ready. She's not human anymore. She's something else, and she's patient." We spent the night barricaded in our living room, lights on, bat in hand, shards of broken glass around us. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow seemed to move with purpose. I realized something terrifying. Revenge had worked, but it had also awakened her fully. Whatever she had been before, she was something more now, something that could never truly die. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before she returned. But we weren't helpless, not completely. We had survived. We had fought back. And now we were ready for her. Whatever it took. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia, sleepless nights, and whispered warnings. Clara had vanished, but her presence lingered in every corner of our lives. Shadows that moved when no one was there, voices that whispered our names in empty rooms, objects that shifted positions while we weren't looking. We realized quickly she didn't need a body anymore. She existed in the space between fear and memory, a predator feeding on the terror she had planted inside us. I spent hours reading, searching for anything that could help us. Old folklore, legends of spirits that clung to anger, that could be banished only by confronting them head-on. Nothing mentioned exactly what she was, but one line kept repeating in my mind. To destroy the darkness, you must bring it into the light. And that's what we had to do. That night, armed with the bat, the shard, and every bit of courage we had, Jake and I returned to the house. The officers had long since abandoned it. The place had been declared unsafe, but to us, it was the only battlefield. The air was heavy, thick with the stench of damp and decay. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching along the walls, crawling across the floor like living creatures. "She's here," Jake whispered. I nodded. "And she's waiting." The moment we stepped inside, the shadows surged, coalescing into her form. Clara stood before us, or something that looked like her. Eyes black as voids, skin pale and cracked, veins glowing faintly with a sickly green light. Her mouth twisted into a grin that promised nothing but pain. "You came back," she hissed. "Brave, foolish, but I admire persistence." "Persistence isn't enough," I said. "This ends tonight." She laughed, a sound that shook the walls. "Ends? No, it begins. You've fed me, you've strengthened me, and now I am eternal." The shadow surged forward, faster than anything human, striking with claws that could tear steel. I raised the bat, blocking the blow, but the impact sent me staggering backward. Jake lunged with the shard, slashing at her chest. The shadow hissed, reforming instantly, her laughter echoing like broken glass. Then I remembered something from my research. A way to force a spirit tied to fear into a weakened state. Light. "Jake, the lights!" I shouted. He understood immediately, flipping the switch on the breaker we had prepared weeks before. Floodlights blazed across the room, bright, harsh, burning away the shadows. Clara shrieked, a sound that pierced my very bones. Her form twisted violently, smoke-like tendrils of darkness flailing as the light cut through her. She screamed, human and inhuman all at once. "You cannot survive," she hissed. "Yes," I said, stepping forward, bat raised. "We can, and we will." The shard in Jake's hand glowed faintly in the reflected light. He stepped beside me, courage radiating from him despite the terror in his eyes. "Together," he said. Together we struck. I swung the bat, smashing into the shadowy figure, while Jake slashed with the shard. Each strike made her form shrink, the darkness bubbling and cracking like molten glass. She screamed, a sound that split the air, a scream filled with rage, fear, and disbelief. "No, I am eternal!" But she wasn't. Light and courage combined, and the darkness fractured, pieces of her form evaporating into the air like smoke. Shadows scattered to the corners, screeching, wailing, fighting to survive. And then, silence. The house felt lighter, warmer. Shadows no longer wreathed on the walls. A faint, almost imperceptible smell of rot lingered, but it was fading. Clara Morrison was gone. Jake collapsed into my arms, exhausted, trembling. "Mom, is it over?" I held him tightly. "It is over. She's gone." For the first time in weeks, I believed it. The next morning, the house was quiet. Sunlight poured through the windows, casting everything in warm, golden light. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath. For the first time, the world felt safe again. Jake held my hand tightly. "Mom, we survived." "Yes," I said, smiling through tears. "We survived, and we're stronger now. Nothing can break us." But even as we left the house behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that some darkness never fully dies, that revenge may end, but scars, on the soul, on the mind, remain. We walked away from that house together, bruised but unbroken, carrying the lessons of terror, resilience, and courage. And I knew, no matter what came next, we would face it together. Clara Morrison was gone, but the memory, the horror, the fear, it would never truly leave us. And maybe that's what made us stronger than her.